and welcome to BlytheRay Business News, where today I'm joined by some of the team from Central Asia Metals, or as they're otherwise known, CAML. CAML list on the AIM market in London with a market capitalisation of £477 million and very well known for returning dividends and capital to its shareholders. That success has been very much built on one particular asset, which today we're celebrating 10 years of production. That asset is the Kounrad plant, the Kounrad operation in Kazakhstan. I'm going to come first of all to Chairman Nick Clarke. Nick, good morning. Welcome to being on the show with us today. What was it about Kounrad when you saw it, you thought, right, this is the asset that I want to acquire for Central Asia Metals?
It goes back a long time, Kounrad. I think the company, as a private company, first acquired the Kounrad asset in about 2006. And over many years, it did some preparatory works. And I joined the company in 2009, which, as many of the viewers will know, was just after the financial crisis. And the company, as a private company, had acquired some 12 assets, gold, copper, throughout Central Asia, most notably in Kazakhstan and in Mongolia. And I was brought in to look at each of those assets to ascertain by the board which was the most likely that they could take to a cash flow position in the shortest possible time. Now, if everybody casts their minds back to those post the financial crisis, there wasn't much money around. There certainly wasn't any debt from the banks, and the equity markets were pretty much closed. So the quest was on to find a potential asset that we could bring into production for a low capital expenditure. And so we set out looking at Kounrad with a bit more detail, thinking, how can we do this a bit different and a bit cheaper? So with a number of other engineers that I brought in with me, most notably Howard Nicholson, we went off to China to get a Chinese engineering institute to do a study for us. We were still private, do the study, ascertain how much we could build a project for, and then we would see whether or not the equity markets would support us in our aim to build a project. The study we produced indicated that we could build Kounrad for about $49 million. That used a combination of Chinese equipment and international equipment, but it was substantially cheaper than a study that had been undertaken just prior to the financial crisis. And so, armed with that information, that we could build a project and produce 10,000 tons of cathode copper from Kounrad, in 2010, we went to the equity markets, supported by Mirabeau as our broker, and we raised $60 million at IPO and joined AIM in late 2010. And that $60 million was the money we used to build Kounrad and also progress some of the other projects that we had.
Pavel, may I come to you now? Pavel Semenchenko is the General Director at the Kounrad operation. Is he joining us from Kazakhstan? Pavel, welcome onto the program.
Thank you.
Just looking back over the last 10 years of production, I mean, I can't ask you to tell me everything that's happened, but what would be one of the two of the highlights of the initiatives that you've put in place on site which have helped the operation progress?
Yeah. Ну, хотелось бы сказать, что с 2007 года, когда компания наша получила право недропользования на отвалы Конрадского рудника, велась систематическая работа по геологическому и технологическому изучению имеющихся запасов меди. И в результате из государственных отчетов мы знали, что в отвалах Конрадского рудника много меди. И как только мы получили право на проект, мы начали подсчитывать количество меди в отвалах. Как по местным казахстанским стандартам, так и позже по международным стандартам JORC. На данный период у нас есть более 600 миллионов тонн руды в Коунраде, содержащей около 600 тысяч тонн меди. И мы можем извлечь из этих отвалов порядка 250 тысяч тонн меди. Мы считали, что технология SASA является прогрессивным способом производства меди на Коунраде. Но раньше в Казахстане ее не применяли. Для подтверждения эффективности технологии SXEW в 2008 году был сконструирован и построен экспериментальный завод производительностью всего 20 тонн в год. который показал экономическую и технологическую целесообразность строительства коммерческого завода. И таким образом в 2010 году началось строительство завода по данной технологии производительностью 10 тысяч тонн меди в год. И спустя 1,5 года этот завод был успешно введен в промышленную эксплуатацию. В 2015 году произошла реконструкция основного производства, и производительность повышена до 15 тысяч тонн катодной меди в год. Хочется сказать, что на данный период сформирована молодая, технически грамотная команда специалистов с уверенностью смотрящая в будущее.
Nick, if I may come back to you now for a moment. Look, for the last 10 years, Kounrad's been a very successful asset for Central Asia Metals. It's given the company the ability to pay dividends and give capital growth to shareholders. What is it about the way that Kounrad is operated that enables you to do all of this?
Well, if I go back to my previous answer, when we raised the $60 million in late 2010 to build Kounrad, obviously the success of the IPO gave us that money. We went ahead and constructed the mine all with equity, with no debt, and that allowed us more freedom of choice and freedom as to how we would construct the project. And eventually we, after 2 years, in April 2012, we started production at Kounrad. Now, the cost estimate to build the project was 49 million, and we actually built it for under $40 million. And we switched it on in late April of 2012. And from that day till now, that project has kicked out copper at world-class costs of 55 cents a pound. Now, that initial production that we enjoyed from April 2012, our stock price wasn't doing particularly well at the time, but we were making money. We were making good money, and the project was really, really working well. And so very early on in the day, late 2012, in fact, when the project was consistently making copper at very low cash costs, we started a dividend policy, which was very early on in the day. And since late 2012, we've paid a dividend back to shareholders. On a per share basis, we paid over £1.32 back to shareholders since the project started in 2012. But more importantly, what the project gave us was, amongst the investment community, the confidence that we had a capital integrity and a capital discipline that enabled us to liaise with our shareholders. We paid them a dividend, and so they trusted us with what we were saying. And that trust was built up over many years of delivering what we told them we would do. And of course, the benefit that we enjoyed of paying that dividend was that when we came to acquire another asset, such as SASA in 2017, we needed to raise quite a bit of equity to allow that project to go through. We could go back to our shareholders, many of those who've been with us since IPO, and say, look, we've got a really good project we'd like you to help us finance. And of course, because of the trust we built up over many years of operating consistent operations at Kounrad, they were willing to support us in that endeavor. And so we were able in late 2017 to raise over $180 million in equity, which during that year was the second largest mining money raise on the market. So that was all done off the back of a consistent operation at Kounrad and delivering on our promises to the shareholders.
If that's very much the bedrock of the company, is this very solid financial performance, as I'm sure we all know, in this modern age, for a company, a mining company, any kind of company, financial performance on its own is not enough. We have to demonstrate to be actually good corporate citizens, good corporate neighbors. Pavel, can I come back to you, because you're on the ground there in Kazakhstan. I know you've established the Konrad Foundation. Can you give us a bit of an insight into the charities and the activities you've supported through the Konrad Foundation?
Yeah, it's true. Об этом я мог бы сказать следующее, что корпоративный фонд «Kounrad» – это благотворительный фонд, который учрежден в 2017 году двумя нашими дочерними компаниями и финансируется за счет годового валового дохода от производства проекта «Kounrad» в размере 0,25%. Миссия этого фонда заключается в следующем. Осуществление социальных, благотворительных, образовательных и общественно полезных целей в интересах города Балхаш, микрорайона Kounrad города Балхаша и прилегающих районов. Целью этого фонда является финансирование услуг в области здравоохранения и образования для наиболее уязвимых и нуждающихся членов общества, а также финансирование таких программ, как улучшение инфраструктуры, экологическая устойчивость, включая инициативы в области оздоровления окружающей среды, преодоления бедности и продовольственной безопасности. Ну, в качестве примера я могу привести два случая. Это кризисный центр, так называемый. Проект реконструкции кризисного центра для женщин и детей, попавших в трудную жизненную ситуацию, был осуществлен в 2020 году. В нежилом помещении в городе Балхаш были произведены отделочные и монтажные работы, закуплена мебель и техника. Всего помещение состоит из 6 комнат, где находится 10 спальных мест. Оснащена всем необходимым комната матери и ребенка. Имеется кухня и бытовая комната. Помещение передано местным органам с ремонтом под ключ. Созданный центр объединил в себе функционал уже действующей организации поддержки жертв домашнего насилия «Комек» и абсолютно новый проект по улучшению качества жизни многодетных матерей и представительность малообеспеченных семей. Общая сумма всех затрат составила более 60 тысяч долларов. И еще один проект, значимый проект здесь, в городе Балхаше, это ПЦР-лаборатория. В декабре 2020 года в центральной больнице города Балхаш была открыта лаборатория полимеразной цепной реакции, так называемая ПЦР. Корпоративный фонд «Kounrad» закупил необходимое оборудование и реактивы. Сотрудники прошли специальное обучение. Помимо балхашцев, лаборатория обслуживает жителей Приозерска, Актагальского и Шетского районов. Охвату подлежит около 130 тысяч человек, живущим в этом регионе. Стоимость проекта составила более 78 тысяч долларов. Вот такие примеры.
Well, thanks for that, Pavel. If that's the operations in Kazakhstan, can I just come to Nick for the chairman's view? Nick, you were involved in the setting up of the foundation. What's your perspective?
Well, it's one of the proudest things I've done in my career is setting up this charitable foundation. It stopped inquiries and claims for financial assistance coming from either political or entities that were not really entitled to the sort of largesse that the Kounrad operation could provide to the community. So to clear up the situation and to make it easier for local management to administer a fund that we'd set up, I decided to try and set up a charitable foundation. But because it's an NGO, it's sometimes, these NGOs sometimes fall foul of political interference because they can be viewed as being not in line with the correct thinking in political terms. But of course, there are plenty of NGOs operating in Kazakhstan. And once we were over that initial political hurdle that was somewhat hesitant of approving it, we could then set in place very definite articles of association that were very prescriptive as to who could receive money. And so that cut out any requests coming from quarters that really we wouldn't want to support. But it was, you know, free up the local management to concentrate on entities that really mattered, such as deprived children, such as homeless shelter for women and what have you. I've actually, one of my last visits to Kazakhstan opened a sand pit in a play area in a primary school. It's those sort of things that make you proud that mining puts back into the community and helps the community from which our workforce come from.
Thanks, Nick. Now, we're here today because we're celebrating 10 years of operation. We talk about 10 years of operation at Kounrad, but you mentioned a few moments ago the acquisition of SASA, which is, of course, the underground lead zinc mine in North Macedonia. Now, can I just ask you, Kounrad, SXEW, solvent extraction, electrowinning of copper, were there any skills or capabilities you were able to transfer from the experience at Kounrad into the underground operation in Macedonia?
Well, yes. I mean, it's experience that you take with you throughout your life and throughout the life of the company as well. What we experienced and what we had the benefit from at Kounrad, when I said we raised equity to build the project, that was the money in the bank, and we didn't have a debt provider looking over our shoulder at every turn and every time we spent money on building our project. And so investors trusted us with their money. And I've always remembered that when we spend money, it's investors' money, shareholders' money. So therefore, hence the dividend repayment, which showed that fiscal discipline that our shareholders liked. I remember in early years speaking to shareholders, and they said, look, Nick, if you want to do a project, come back to us, and if we like it, we'll support you in an equity raise. But in the meantime, if you're building up money, now we're talking 2012-13 period, you may remember there were lots of mining companies bagging assets all around the place and overpaying, and subsequently many of those assets had to be written down on the balance sheet. We said to our shareholder base, look, we're going to pay back dividends. If we want to buy something, we'll come and ask you for that money. So that's what we did over many years at Kounrad between 2012 and 2017. And then when we looked for another asset, we were looking for an asset that was in the lowest quartile of the cash cost curve. But underpinning it all is a steadfast resolution to pay back shareholders, no matter what we do, to ensure that we pay debt off, which we've done, which we took out some debt to buy SASA. That debt gets paid off completely in August of this year. We will have paid off $200 million of debt and paid a dividend over the last 5 years. So I think we've shown our commitment to our shareholders. We've shown commitment to the communities through our foundations that we've set up. And we've shown a commitment to our workforce as well, who are some of the best paid workers in both Kazakhstan and North Macedonia. And so it is possible to keep all your stakeholders happy, or we believe so anyway. And rather than chase another asset to grow the company that could take a lot of money and not fit in the stable of assets that we want, which is low cash cost producers, we will continue to make money, good money, pay shareholders back dividends. And when we find that next asset to move on, it has to be something which fits into the stable. And so the basis of your question, and I know I've gone around the houses a bit here, Tim, was what are we taking from Kounrad? And what we took is be consistent, make decisions within yourself. Don't outsource those decisions to consultants or engineering groups or banks or whatever. Do things that you can control within the company. And I think you'll end up with a stronger, better motivated workforce.
Well, let's pick up that theme for the final point of this interview. We're talking about 10 years of production. Let's spin it forward. What can we look for the next 10 years, Nick? What's going to be the highlights of Kounrad in the next 10 years?
Well, in 10 years, Kounrad will still be operating. I mean, that's a great thing about it. We produced over 125,000 tons of cathode copper from Kounrad so far. And I think there's about another 100,000 tons or thereabouts to go in reserves. We won't be producing at the same level that we produced for the last 10 years. It will tend to drop off slightly, but it will still be very low cash cost, steady producer. And And we will have employed people in Kounrad, in the Balkhash region, for 20 years, paying very good wages and paying a lot of money into the local community. By that time, I suspect that the end of the project, we'll have paid into the local community something of the order of $15 million in social payments and whatever. But by the 2032, that the project 34, the project is due to finish. So yeah, and I'm very proud of that. And who knows, it might even continue longer than that.
Nick, Pavel, thanks for joining us very much today. As I said at the top of the edition, that was Nick Clarke, Chairman of Central Asia Metals, and Pavel Semenchenko, who's the General Director of the Kounrad copper operation. Both guys are from Central Asia Metals, listed on the AIM market in London. That's it from this edition of BlytheRay Business News. Thanks for watching.